Hey, what's up everybody? BDFfortyfour coming at you with another video. Alright, so welcome to my 2024 mock draft. I'm doing only the first round. I thought I would do the second round this year, but I don't think so. I think I'll just settle with the first round because too much can happen in the second round that could be very, very unpredictable. And I just don't think it's even a good source of time, really. But I did a lot of things here that I think are unconventional, to be honest with you. Some people are going to hate this mock draft because of it. It's a lot of things that you may have seen in your in other mocks that you just aren't going to see here. I don't know if that has to do with voter fatigue on my end, since I've been doing a lot of mock drafts online. Some stuff is just honestly me believing in certain things that everybody else doesn't believe in, and vice versa. Maybe you'll see some things that you're used to seeing, but I didn't make any trades with this thing, and I do believe there will be trades, which is another kind of factor into my thinking in regards to this mock draft. I wouldn't have put certain people in certain places, guys who wouldn't have fallen if I would have known of trades that are likely to occur that would make these things make more sense. My intention was to put myself in these GM shoes to the best of my ability. I will admit I don't know everybody's roster as well as I should, so if some of this stuff is off in that regard, I still have a lot to learn, but I did a whole lot of homework this year. I studied much more about this draft class than I did last year, and I think this year's draft class is so much more unpredictable, even though not as talented in the top half of the lottery. I think this draft is deep. I wrote down many names in my honorable mentions as well that I'll try to get to. It's almost as many names as it is in the draft there. So let's, without further ado, get started here. With the number one overall pick, I have the Atlanta Hawks taking Zachary Richarchet, a 6'9" small forward out of France, 204 pounds, 19 years old. Truth of the matter is, I just really like the idea of Jalen Johnson and Zachary Richarchet being a part of the rebuild over there in Atlanta. I understand they could use a center for sure. I thought about adding some other names there. Of course, Alex Sarr is somebody who is now fallen in my draft, but to me, I think Zachary Richarchet is as good a prospect as any for them, especially if they're going to continue to have strong point guard play, which I think is inevitable. Zachary Richarchet is not a guy who we expect to make plays for himself too often, but with his wingspan being as it is, he can definitely help on the defensive end. And then on the offensive end, he's a catch-and-shoot nightmare. He's going to score a lot of points in this league and be one of the best shooters, if not the best shooter, in this draft class. So I have him going to Atlanta, even though it stands to reason why most people have Alex Sarr going there. I'm perfectly fine with being wrong throughout the course of this mock draft, but this is where we're at with it. The number 2 overall pick in Washington, I'm going with Ron Holland, 6'7", 192 pounds, G League Ignite forward, 18 years old. I personally think, and I'm going to say this, I think Alex Sarr is somebody who should probably have a center next to him, and I don't necessarily love him trying to be the main center in a rebuilding situation without that piece in place. Now, granted, they can add pieces slowly with Washington, so there's a lot of different ways they could go. But my thinking was, let's go with the upside of Ron Holland, who's little more versatile in my opinion, can also play fantastic perimeter defense, but probably is going to help me a little more offensively as he grows than I expect Alex Sarr to develop into. A wing, which is, a very valuable position in this league, somebody who can play multiple positions. I don't think you can ever do wrong with that. Obviously, they went and got a wing last year, but I think they're pretty set with their shooting guard position, so I didn't want to take a shooting guard here. But I just think that Ron Holland can step in, be a part of a rebuilding situation, develop slowly, and ultimately put a lot of pressure on the rim, be an exciting player to bring to Washington that can go very well with who they brought in last year, and just continue to move forward with what it is that they have. He's likely not going to win many games. But I just think Ron Holland is one of the best players in this draft. The more I do homework on him, I know he's not a perfect player. His shot has to come around, things like that. But I just think the Washington Wizards have ample time to develop him. And I understand that next year's draft, they're going to have opportunities to get guards and stuff like that. So I figured going this route could be very strong. Without a center, you're not going to do a lot of winning. I understand that. But you don't want to do a whole lot of winning in Washington anyway. So the most important thing is to just accumulate pieces. And while someone could argue that Alex Sarr is probably one of the more valuable pieces, so you could probably draft him and trade down. Again, I didn't want to do any trades in this particular mock, so that's kind of why that is. I actually think Washington would take Sarr and trade him, but I stuck to my guns. No trades in this particular one. So that's why that is as it is. Ron Holland going second. from the G League Ignite. To the Wiz, third pick. I told you guys yesterday with the Rockets, I'm going to take a forward with the Rockets. Now, I don't expect the Rockets to necessarily take a forward, but I have them taking Montes Buzelis. Now, I know this is a controversial pick. Montes Buzelis is kind of polarizing in the sense that a lot of people have different ideas about how far he should fall or how early he should go. I think this is probably the earliest I've ever seen him go in anybody's mock draft. But my thinking is, I would have given them Ron Holland. As I told you guys yesterday in a video, I think that the Rockets would be best to try to take a small forward here to kind of continue on the path of what it is that they have, which are positionless forwards that are very valuable in this league. I don't think they need a center. I could have went Klingon, I could have went Sar here, but I just don't think they need a center. I think they could more so use more small forwards and kind of get rid of some of the higher contracts that they have that are going to small forwards. They signed some guys last year that I think they'd probably be best to move on from. They have a bunch of kids at a lot of different positions, mostly forward, to be honest with you. But I just think you never drop off when you have perimeter defense. You never actually drop off when you have these type of wings, and they're covetable. I just think they're more covetable than a lot of stuff in this draft. And again, the Rockets are likely to trade this pick. I expect them to take Alex Sar in real life and then trade down to get Buzelis or something like that if they really want him. But no trade, so I had to do it this way. And that's really the nature of what we're looking at here. And that'll kind of be a theme throughout the course of this thing. Trades would make this make more sense. But we're not trying to make sense. We're trying to keep it strong on regards to no trades being done, because I don't like predicting trades because it's a lot of different moving parts that change the context of what you're looking at. It's not simple in my mind. So that's why I went with Montes Buzelis at 6'10", 208 out of the G League Ignite, going to the Rockets, because I just think if you continue to add as many positionless players on the forward position, the wing position, you can put yourself in a position to have switchable players in every position. You can get rid of some guys, pick and choose who you want to keep, and ultimately always have valuable pieces in this league for which are definitely needed. And I just think they're set at guard, they're set at center, they are set at small forward, but they also have a massive contract in Bridges. I believe his name is Bridges. I might have messed up his name, but whatever. Dude from the Memphis Grizzlies. I think they should move on from his contract at $80 million. I think Green also, old man Green, should probably be out of there. So you can put Montes Buzelis in there along with what it is that they already have, and Thompson and Cam Whitmore and the other forwards, and just play them a bunch of different ways. Of course, you got Smith at the power forward position, so he could play some of his backup. Smith can move to the center, and then you can move those guys up into the small forward, shooting guard, and power forward position. So there's a lot of different versatility that I think a Montes Buzelis can bring to this situation, so long as they're willing to move on from some of those other small forwards and slip in yet another rookie contract, which will make their team extremely flexible going forward. Reed Shepard could have went there, but I did not have him go there because I think he's a little redundant to Fred VanVleet and not as switchable in terms of his height and stuff like that. So we'll talk about where Reed ends up going a little later. But number 4, we got the Spurs taking Stephen Castle. Stephen Castle, 6'7", point guard, question mark, 182 pounds. No, excuse me, 210 pounds, freshman out of UConn. And Stephen Castle is one of the best defensive players in this league. He wants to play the point guard really bad, and I tried to put him in a place early enough in the draft to respect his draft stock that would ultimately allow him to play the point guard. So this is what I was thinking. The San Antonio Spurs could use a point guard. They're not really solidified in that position. Stephen Castle can also play other positions if he's willing. And it just makes for an easy situation, since from what I see, he's a Spurs guy, defensive guy. I think he's going to come in, be able to really sit in that chair, play in multiple positions for Popovich. And I just think that when you have a guy like Stephen Castle in place for the Spurs, you kind of continue in the tradition of defense to offense, and someone who's going to make a lot of plays, put a lot of pressure on the rim, and just ultimately be a nice rebounder, all different types of stuff that you want him to do except shoot the ball. And given the fact that they have a stretch 5 in Wembanyama, I think they can probably get away with having a player like that in their lineup, probably more so than a lot of teams who otherwise don't have as much shooting as they're potentially able to provide in that way. So I think Stephen Castle and Wembanyama can go forward being really monstrous. Obviously, you got Sohan in place, you got Johnson in place, you got Vassell in place. So some of these guys can really shoot the ball and otherwise make plays and things like that. I just think that shooting guard, small forward point guard position, and really he could play all three, can be solidified with Castle. You can try to convince him to play the shooting guard position. I think he's probably best there. But if for some reason he just needs to play the point guard, this is an opportunity for him to be able to do that without any static. So I like that situation for him. Stephen Castle at 4 with Spurs. Number 5, I got the Pistons taking Reed Sheppard. I wasn't in love with this pick. I'm not going to lie to you guys. This is where it really got really tough for me because I was thinking I could put Alex Sarr there. Obviously, he's falling a little too far for anybody's reason, even my own. But what I looked at the Pistons, I said Alex Sarr is not a three-point shooter, and the most important thing for the Pistons, beyond everything, is making sure they have floor spacing. That was the issue last year. They drafted Thompson. They had Duren. They had so many different people, and I watched some of their games early on during the historically horrible streak, and I just felt like there was nothing more than they needed than a real, actual shooter. And Reed Sheppard is exactly that. 6'1", short guy, 182 pounds, out of Kentucky, shooting guard. Freshman, I think one of the most talented players in this draft. Even though he's a short guy, he's a very talented defensive player as well, which I think is really going to be useful to the Detroit Pistons. Obviously, they have to move some things around with their guards. Maybe they move on from Ivy. Obviously, you keep Cunningham, but Sasser was the guy that made Reed Sheppard difficult for me because they already have a talented, very short point guard in their rotation, and I could never see Reed and Sasser on the floor at the same time if I'm actually trying to be able to defend anybody at all. But I looked at the idea that they had Duren back there. You still got Isaiah Stewart, so there's some size down there. You still got Cade Cunningham, who's more than capable of playing bigger positions than the point guard position from which he's slotted at. And I just felt like you can afford to try to figure out what's going on with Ivy if you want to move on from him. And Ivy, to me, brings about more redundancy in regards to the three-point shooting because he can't shoot himself. So, you think about Thompson and how he slotted at the 3, maybe the 2, maybe the 4, depending on the situation. I just felt like, man, there's not enough shooting down there. And as bad as they could use an Alex Sarr shot blocker next to Duren, some insurance for Duren, I just don't trust his three-point shot to fit the needs of this particular basketball team. So he doesn't slip because I'm down on Sarr. He slips because the Pistons really can't afford not to get shooting in this draft. And I thought it was a little too early for them to be taking a guy like Dalton Connect. Montes Buzelis is off the board. Somebody that I know is connected to their owner. Somebody they probably would have been happy to have. Risa Shea off the board. So I just felt like the Pistons really needed to take Reed Sheppard, even though they really should not have another small guard in their rotation, in my opinion. So this is one of the ones I had the most difficulty with, but I landed on shooting. I just thought that was the most important thing for them. They must get spacing on that floor. So, number 6, the Hornets are going to take Alex Sarr. I know this is a long way for him to slip. I do not expect him to slip like this in real life. I really don't. In fact, I probably expect Atlanta to just take him in 1. But if I'm doing the GMing, he probably falls this far. I don't think the Hornets necessarily have a need at center. And some people think they'll probably take Donovan Clingan, but probably not if Alex Sarr is on the board. Alex Sarr also can play some forward. For me, I know what I believe Alex Sarr is going to be, which is somebody who's tall, who can track around smaller people, be a rim protector. He's not a particularly great rebounder. So a lot of the things that people are really high on him about, I just don't think really fit in every situation. But when you consider the fact that this is a team that already has their point guard position locked up, they got all the guards in the world. They picked up Miller last year at the small forward position. They still have Williams at the center position. I just felt like that was where they could probably upgrade at the power forward position. Obviously, they got Grant Williams, but I look at Grant Williams as a 3, maybe a 4, can definitely play some backup. You could slip Alex Sarr into that starting lineup, have prime rim protection. I look at him as a much better version of Infinity Money. Everybody knows who that is. Guy that they had a lot of trouble with, ended up signing with the Clippers. Alex Sarr is just a souped-up version of him, and I think that what you thought Infinity Money would turn out to be is what Alex Sarr could actually do for the Charlotte Hornets, right next to Williams, one of the best shot-blocking front courts in the Eastern Conference immediately if you get those 2 players. Another high-level, fast-paced player that can be in that Charlotte lineup. I think he and Miller and the guys that they got down there can do a lot of wonders. Obviously, this is a great spot for a guy like Stephen Castle, too. I think most people like putting him there in Charlotte, but he's already off the board, of course, on my mock, so I don't think Alex Sarr should fall any further. 6'11", 224 center from France at 19 years old. This is where he's going to stop at the Hornets, and I think that's a massive steal if something like that were to happen. Portland Trailblazers are going to select the 7th pick in the draft, Donovan Clingan. 7'1", 282-pound center out of UConn. Now, I don't know that he'll actually go to Portland, but if he does fall to 7, I don't think Portland passes him up, put it like that. I can see a million different ways he doesn't fall to Portland, including a team trading up to get him, which is actually what I more so expect. But again, no trades. So this is where he falls to. I'm just not a fan of Ayton, if I'm being completely honest with you. I don't think a lot of people are. And he could use a really good backup to put a little fire underneath his backside to make him play better, you know what I mean? Or even somebody who can step in front of him and make it so that he is coming off of the bench. Because at the end of the day, his motor has been a little bit of an issue. And for a rebuilding team like the Portland Trailblazers, you can love to have a guy like Donovan Clingan come in and set the tone for what those guards' defensive deficiencies could potentially be. And that's what I had in mind. I just don't love the idea of Simons and Scoot defensively at all. But if they have somebody in the paint that's going to swat everything, a defensive genius, basically in the paint, someone who's going to make plays for them on the offensive end to get them the ball and things like that. They have a lot of young wings that they have to develop. Small forward position is a bunch of young players, so I definitely didn't want to address that with this pick. I just felt like Donovan Clingan could come in, scoot Ayton out the way. You could trade Ayton or just move Ayton to the bench or have his successor in place right away. And just have Donovan Clingan come in and just be that next level center for them at 7'1". Someone you want to guard Jokic, someone who can guard Wemby potentially, and maybe not out to the three-point line, but definitely somebody who's extremely talented and can help you on both sides of the floor. And in the Western Conference, when you're rebuilding, if you don't have that piece, you're probably not building properly. So for me, the Portland Trailblazers don't have that piece. And, I don't trust Robert Williams to stay healthy. So this just fit for me. Donovan Clingan gives them some insurance for those other two centers that are not reliable, and they definitely did not need a guard. So that was my thinking. The Spurs are up next. With the 8th pick in the draft, the Spurs are going to take Nikola Topic, 6'7", 203-pound guard out of Serbia, 18 years old. Topic is one of the best, if not the very best, playmaker in this draft. He is also somebody who's coming off of a very unfortunate knee injury that kind of dropped his value. But for me, if I'm the Spurs, I've already drafted Castle. Castle wants to be a point guard. So if for some reason Nikola Topic is out for the season, I can let Steven Castle run the point guard for a year, and, we'll see what happens there. I can afford for this particular pick not necessarily to be able to help me, even though you do want to put pressure on yourself, try to build around Wemby in such a way that allows for some talent to play right now. But I think in the long run, they'll be so happy to have Topic and Castle as their backcourt with Wemby in the front court. That's a big backcourt right there. More than capable of putting a lot of pressure on the rim. Steven's going to play defense. Topic's not really a defensive player. Neither of them really shoot the ball, so that can be a bit questionable. But again, as long as we still have Wemby and Johnson, I expect that my floor spacing will come from my front court in my center position. And then you can address it even further since you have more picks and more opportunities with such a fantastic war chest of things to use to get better if you're the Spurs. So I just felt like if anybody's going to be able to do well with a backcourt that isn't necessarily a good shooting backcourt, but a fantastic cerebral massive backcourt, it would probably be the Spurs. And so, and best case scenario, Topic only misses a portion of the season, so you can have him back very soon. So I just didn't think Nikola Topic was going to fall too far after I did a bunch of thinking about his where he's at, because at the end of the day, there are a lot of teams that need what he does, love what he does, and some of them can afford to actually let him wait a year. So that was my thinking. Grizzlies, I got them taking the hometown kid, Dalton Connect, with the 9th overall pick, 6'6", 197 pounds, small forward, senior, 23 years of age. Dalton Connect is just a fantastic shooter, man. He's an all-around scorer. Not really going to help you defensively. There's a lot of different ways the Grizz could have went. I would have probably wanted them to take Clingan maybe. Maybe could have got another guard, but I just didn't feel all that comfortable about them bringing in a guard, given the fact that Ja's coming back. They got Bane. They also found Vance Williams last year. So they got a lot of stuff there in Grizzly land that should make it so that they are able to eat pretty good, get back into the playoff hunt. And I just think bringing in a senior, the best senior in this lottery area, probably helps them. A hometown kid, Dalton Connect. I like the idea of that. And he's just a fantastic floor spacer. Him and Bane are going to be shooting threes from here to Texas. I know they need a center. Maybe they try to get that piece, but I think they can live without that center probably a little more so than some of these other teams who are going to need one, rather than to reach for a guy like Khalil Ware or something like that, or Yves Messi or Zach Edey. They could probably just take another fantastic small forward that can slip in and shoot the ball extremely well and just be a potent offense for them to run it up next year. So that's one option. They still have other things to address, but I think Dalton Connect at 9 is good value for the Grizzlies, who don't, in my opinion, really need a guard. And there are a lot of guards left. So speaking of which, the Utah Jazz did take a guard, Isaiah Collier, at the 10th pick, 6'4", 202 pounds, USC freshman point guard, 19 years of age. Isaiah Collier, that's a little high for me. I did mock him to the Jazz because I think that when I consider what they have, they could use a point guard, and I didn't like the idea of them having a smaller point guard. I think Isaiah Collier can do what he does in Utah as a freshman, develop, have a slow development, which I think could be necessary, and then have a big role going forward instead of worrying about somebody stepping in front of him. Keontae George, I think, is a fantastic 2-guard. One combination, so you can afford to bring a point guard in. And then they have a lot of other things going on with their roster that I just didn't think they needed a center, didn't think power forward was necessarily what they need. They have developing players like Taylor Hendricks there. You got Collins at the power forward. You got THT somewhere roaming around with a lot of opportunities ahead for him. You got the issue with Clarkson if you're going to bring him back, Sexton if you're going to bring him back. So it's a lot of things to consider with the guard spot, but I just felt like with the idea that Sexton and Clarkson are likely going to be gone, you can have Isaiah Collier slip in and just be himself. And if they're not gone, then you could take your time with him and let him develop since he's only 19. So Utah has room to do whatever they want to do, basically. All of their players are developing, and they got house money, man. They can move marketing if they want to. So it's just a lot of different things that they'll be able to do that maybe other teams don't have the wiggle room to do. So I figured in bringing in a guy like Collier, it gives them a guy with some size, a guy who's going to put a lot of pressure on the rim, a guy a lot of people think has all-star upside. I just thought that was pretty solid value at 10 for them. Number 11, and it's going to break some people's hearts, man. Cody Williams is going to the Bulls at 6'8", 179, Colorado, shooting guard, freshman, 19 years old. I could have let him slip to OKC. I know I could have, but my thinking was I didn't want to bring the Bulls some of the other things that were available to them. Maybe you could have went with a center, you know what I mean? Maybe you could have went with like a Devin Carter, but I just felt like even though it's been understood that they are rumored to like Devin Carter, when I'm drafting for the Bulls, I just can't see myself bringing another guard to their situation. I need somebody who's likely going to be able to play the small forward shooting guard position, in my opinion. Maybe you bring them a 4, but I didn't love the 4s in this range for them. So I just tried to give them the best value I thought I could, and I think Cody Williams is probably the best player on the board for their needs. I didn't like Rob Dillingham for them, just a little too small. I like the idea of allowing Kobe White to have his opportunity to just do his thing at the point guard position. So that was my thinking there. You could have somebody come in at the shooting guard position. Maybe they're moving on from Zach LaVine. Maybe they're moving on from DeMar DeRozan. If they are moving on from either one of these guys, this should open up the door for Cody Williams. And if not, then you got a freshman who's developing behind you who can come off the bench and really help. Of course, they still also have the hometown kid, whose name's not coming to mind, but he's another player in that position, but not really a starter. So, the Bulls are just a team that has a lot to overcome. And I think bringing in their rebuilding pieces now, anytime they can get a nice rebuilding piece for tomorrow, is a good thing. And I think Cody Williams solidifies that for me. Somebody who can play right next to Kobe White and really put a lot of pressure on teams defensively. Somebody who should develop the scoring punch from behind the arc. Hopefully he can put some real strength on him. He really needs to work on his core strength, as we talked about in previous videos. And then he'll be probably as good as his brother, in my opinion. So I know OKC would probably like to have him, but I didn't have him falling past 11, not in this draft. So next up, OKC. I have them taking a center, Khalil Ware, and that's a little high for Khalil Ware. There are some other players on this board that I honestly do like a little better than Khalil Ware right now, but I just really genuinely believe the OKC Thunder need a center. I know a lot of people have them mocking a small forward. They could have went to James Salone. I think that's a typical OKC type of move, but they do have a bunch of forwards in that position. That small forward position, they have done this already with other guys. And I looked on their board and I say, I like Jay Will, who is not J-Dub's, the Williams brother that we just said, Cody. That's not Cody's brother, the other guy. But I don't look at him as a pure center. And when it really comes down to it, they really do need to address that position. I think that's one of the reasons why they're not in the finals facing off against the Celtics, is because they did not necessarily have that piece in place that can slide in and play the 5. So that's really my thing. Obviously, a lot of people are going to look at me and say, well, they had the number 2 overall pick last year, and he's the 5, but he's a little thin to me. That's the only thing. I like that player. I think he's going to be an all-star, freak of nature, unicorn. I really, really like him, but I just think that he could use another long, lengthy guy next to him, just like I said about Sarr in a previous video, which is my thinking about why I didn't really want Sarr in certain situations where he could be the only center. Because I think of guys like him, Mobley, this guy that I'm referring to in OKC, they all are a little too skinny to be guarding some of these bigger centers that are now starting to slowly but surely creep into the league. You got your 300-pound centers left and right all over the place. I just think that that's what OKC really needs to address. And for me, Khalil Ware was probably the highest level upside center there. Somebody who's not going to demand a lot of minutes right now, so you can still use J-Dub, you can still use whoever you want to sign, step in front of them. But at the end of the day, you got your project center coming up with a high level upside, 7 foot, 7'4" wingspan, who's going to help with just defending some of the people that you really would probably not want your last year's pick to have to guard. I can't think of the man's name, but I'm not going to try to wreck my brain over that. The point is, I think they need a center next to this guy. I know a lot of people think he can run the center position. I would prefer him play a stretch 4 role and not have to be guarding the Jokic's and the Gobert's and all those people. I want somebody else to do that. And I think Khalil Ware, if he puts on some strength, it's going to take some time, he'll be able to do that. And then him right next to him, to the other center, is just a lot of length to deal with in the future. And I don't think the OKC Thunder necessarily need a guard. I know they're probably going to move on from someone in that front court position, but they have so many ball handlers that I just didn't think that was necessarily where I wanted to go with OKC. So that's what I did with OKC, man. I just felt like a center position is probably the most important for them, even though that's an underrated statement. So, number 13, the Sacramento Kings are going to select Rob Dillingham. 6'1", 164 pounds, Kentucky point guard freshman. Rob Dillingham can go anywhere between 2 and 20. I mean, his range in this draft is vast. I've drafted him as high as 2 in certain mocks. So in this particular mock, he just happens to fall to the Kings. I think that's a safe place for him to fall. The Kings are likely going to lose Malik Monk. Obviously, you have De'Aaron Fox, but I think most people think Rob Dillingham is going to be a microwave point guard scorer, shooting guard combination scorer. So in this situation, I just felt like he could come off the bench and do what he does. Probably don't want to play him next to De'Aaron Fox too often, but when De'Aaron Fox sits down or in certain types of small ball lineups where you really want to run the score up, Dillingham's arguably the best shooter in this draft himself. Definitely the best dribbler, ball handler, deck move, shifty guy. He's the best at that. And he's just going to come off the bench and be fantastic wherever he goes. The question is, who can afford to have him on the bench? Or rather, who can have him out there without having to ask for him to play defense, is I guess what I'm trying to say here. He can't really defend too many guys in the NBA because of his slight frame at 164 pounds. So I think 6'1" is generous. Even though he plays bigger than that and has a lot of athleticism, he can dunk the ball with ease. He plays bigger than 6'1", in my opinion, 164. But at the end of the day, his height is what it is, and you really don't want him being taken advantage of in too many situations. So I kind of prefer him to go somewhere where there is rim protection, maybe a San Antonio where you have that, maybe OKC, even if they didn't have so many guards that were probably coming off the bench to kind of get in the way of Dillingham's opportunities. I would want more rim protection than Sabonis for Dillingham. So it's a lot of different ways the Kings can go. They have other needs to address, in my opinion. Maybe Sabonis needs that center next to him to move him to the 4 a little bit as well. Maybe a stretch center would be great there. But I just felt like Rob Dillingham had fallen far enough, and they really do have an open spot for a shooting guard there off the bench if Malik Monk leaves, which it looks like it's imminent. So I felt Dillingham would be good there. Less about the fit for the Kings, more so about just not letting him fall too much further. That's really what it was for me. So the Blazers, with their second pick, the 14th overall pick, they're going to take Tidjane Salaün, 6'10", 207-pound power forward from France, 18 years of age. I took a project there. I just couldn't stand to give them a guard, man. I couldn't bring myself to bring a guard to that situation. They have like 4 leading guards down there already. They got a bunch of small forwards that need to develop. So Tidjane Salaün is definitely going to be in there trying to develop with those guys. But at the end of the day, I just didn't think that it really made sense for me to address anything else. Obviously, we had already gotten them Donovan Clingan. No point guard needed. So what position could I give them? I could have went Tristan da Silva, but I kind of preferred da Silva being more in a win-now situation. Maybe you want to just give them Devin Carter, but I just don't see an opportunity for him to get the minutes he deserves. There's a lot of different guys that could have went there. Maybe Tyler Smith is also a guy that I think could go to the Blazers in this situation and be pretty good. But I just went with Tidjane Salaün. I like his upside on the offensive end. I love his length. I love his energy. And I just think he's going to slot in real nicely with the next generation Blazers as they go forward. So I just think he's going to be a nice role player on that team until he develops his highest upside, which can probably be a starter or even an all-star. But this is a place he can take his time, develop, and he has plenty of other young guys that are along the same timeline as him. So by 2029, the Blazers should be a hell of a team if they start collecting guys like Tidjane Salaün and these other guys that they have on their roster. So I like it. I like it for the Blazers. I don't love it, but that's where I landed. The Miami Heat are going to get a guy that I think everybody thinks should go to the Heat, to be honest with you. He just fits their mold of what they do. Devin Carter, 6'3", 200 pounds, out of Providence, point guard, junior, 22 years of age. Just a fantastic defensive player. Not really a great shooter, but somebody who's been known to knock down some shots. He can brick pretty bad, too. His dad played in the NBA. It's just somebody that I think is going to be the next level of what you want your rebounding point guards to be about. He can make. He can play some too if necessary. I think he'll put on some more weight, but he plays with a lot of motor, a lot of fire. Definitely going to play in a high-powered opportunity with the Miami Heat culture. He's going to fit in there just fine. I just think that he and the Heat are a match made in heaven, and I think most people agree and probably expect if he doesn't fall too far in the draft, he'll land at 15 right in their lap, and they'll take him. So that was a no-brainer. That one's easy. The Sixers, at the 16th pick overall, I have them taking Tristan da Silva. I really think they need to address their wing position, and while they may be able to do that in free agency, we know that they are big game hunting in free agency. I hear names like, obviously, my own Laker LeBron James and Paul George and Jimmy Butler. So if they land that piece, maybe they can go in a different direction. But I honestly didn't think they needed too much. I don't know what they're going to do with Buddy Yield, so maybe they could go guard here. But my thinking was just bring them a solidified small forward just in case they strike out the small forward position. They can fill that role because they really, really need to fill that role. Tristan da Silva can shoot the ball. I think his handle is a little iffy, but ultimately he's somebody who's going to come in as a senior, 23 years of age, and be ready to play a playoff game next year. Can defend on one end with long arms and score on the other end, drive at the rim, be just a nice corner three-point shooting option, and somebody who's going to ultimately really fill in that role very nicely. So I just think that he fits very well with the 76ers and probably should be on a team that's ready to win. All right, the Lakers, I didn't deviate from what I've been saying the whole time, y'all. I reached down and I took DaRon Holmes. Now, in the perfect world, you probably don't want the Lakers to take DaRon Holmes at 17 because you could probably get DaRon Holmes at like 24, but he fits the need too much for my team. I need that power forward, center combination player who can stretch the floor, be a nice defender, someone who can develop into being big enough to possibly guard bigger players. Now, I don't know at 221 he's there yet, but I think he can put on some weight, and with his weak side and defensive help ability can really, really fill in for Bron and AD and play next to either one of them. I think he'd do a better job with what his strengths are than a guy like Rui Hachimura, who's a little smaller than him, trying to ask him to defend some of these guys. I like the size that De'Ron brings. Of course, you probably like a guy like Zach Edey in this situation as well, just in case. Just at 7'4", 306, you probably want a little more weight. So I'm not mad if the Lakers decide to go Edey over Holmes in this situation. But me personally, I just felt like I valued this floor spacing and two-way ability that Holmes provide. You could also go with a Tyler Smith here, maybe Kyle Filipowski, but I'm just not as high on those guys, to be honest with you. And I really do think the Lakers need to address their center position. Power forward, maybe not so much, but someone who could definitely slip in and play the center position a bit better with absolute two-way ability. So that's what I wanted to do, take the guy out of Dayton. At 21 years of age, he's a junior, so he should be more ready to help than maybe some of these other guys. And, of course, I had already had Khalil Ware off the board, so for me, I just thought that De'Ron Holmes is probably where I would land if I were drafting for my Los Angeles Lakers. But there are other options. At 18, I got another option. Yves Messi is who I got the Magic taking. I know a lot of people think the Magic are going for a point guard, but I can't do it. I just can't do it. Just like with a few other teams before this pick, there's no way in hell I'm going to look at the Magic situation and say they actually need a point guard. I know a lot of people are doing that. Maybe they're still trying to figure out who their point guard is, but they have a logjam at guard that I cannot shake, and I will not shake. So they will not be getting a guard out of this draft, even though I think they'll probably do that anyway. I'm not going to do it. You just drafted Black last year. Let him have that point guard position. You don't need a damn point guard. So, Yves Messi at 6'11", 223 pounds, Baylor center, freshman. I know they love shot blocking, 20 years old. They have a thing for length and shot blocking. This is one of the most athletic centers in the league. Run, jump, dunk, rebound, block shots. There's not too much to his game, but he's an excellent pick setter. So I think he'll be really good in the pick and roll for some of their other guys. They didn't need a forward, obviously, because their superstars are forward. So I didn't want to bring somebody in who's capped off as a backup necessarily. But the center position, they got Carter in there. He's cool. You got another guy down there. Can't think of his name. He's played for the Pacers. But he's cool. I don't really think that they are set at the center position as much as people probably would give them an opportunity to think they are. And if you put Yves Messi at 223 and then you got Banchero down there, like 250, that's a lot of size and a lot of athleticism. Very difficult to rebound over those guys. Of course, you got to bring back Jonathan Isaac. So I just think this brings him yet another Magic-like guy who can block shots, because I know at the end of the day, the Magic value shot blocking above all else, and they've been showing me that for almost 9 years now. So I figured Yves Messi is a player that would be safe for them, high fly act, somebody who can catch lobs, somebody who can help them defensively, somebody who's going to not necessarily demand minutes right away since he's a freshman, still has to do some more developing, but just a man's body that's going to dunk the ball and ultimately really, really create a lot of problems physically down there for other teams. So I love that player for the Magic, even though there are other options for them too. You may have noticed a couple people have fallen that you don't expect to fall. And we'll get to those names because they're going to keep falling. Next up is the Raptors at 19. And I got them taking Zach Edey, hometown guy. 7'4", 306 pounds. I'm telling you, that's probably good for my Lakers low-key. But I did skip on Zach, and I let him go to the Raptors here. From Purdue, senior, 22 years of old, center. Zach Edey's just a monster, dude. Not really somebody I expected to stretch the floor, but definitely somebody who's going to block a lot of shots. One of the best college players in the history of college sports. Honestly, he really is. When you look at the numbers, it's just domination. He doesn't miss very much. He dunks the ball. His hook shot's good. His coordination's good in that way. Pretty decent free throw shooter for his size. Just somebody you really trust. Not to play a lot of minutes. Maybe not be a star in today's NBA, quote unquote. But I do think that his domination is undeniable. And if he's given an opportunity, he can probably be as good as people think he's going to be. So they do have a center position situation where they traded first rounder for a center a couple years ago, and that's why this pick is so bad this year, to be honest with you. But I just don't love that player for them. I just think this is a much better situation where you're starting your rebuild, you're bringing in a hometown guy with a big name and a big body and the ability to defend. The rim protect as good as anybody at 7'4", and just a monster dunking the ball, man. He's going to score a lot of points if you give him the ball in his spots. And I think there will be opportunities for him to do that. Obviously, he's not trekking out to the three-point line to defend anybody, so there are going to be opportunities for you to sit him down. But in a moldable situation with a guy like Scotty Barnes, who's going to find him, a big body dude down there, I just think that there's opportunities for Zach Edey to really play some good bench minutes off, early on, and eventually grow into being a starter for them. And I just like the idea of continuing on the hometown track. They brought home Kelly Olynyk, who stretched the floor, so that should help a lot. Obviously, you got R.J. Barrett down there from that area as well. And I just like the idea of them continuing on that path, try to rebuild what they have. And I think Zach Edey falling to 19 to the Raptors is an excellent choice for them. All right, Cleveland Cavaliers. I have selecting at the 20th pick overall, Tyler Smith, 6'10", 218 pounds, out of the G League Ignite. Small forward, power forward position, although I think of him more as a power forward. This is your quintessential stretch four, to be honest with you. They say he's a small forward, but at 6'10", 218, I think the power forward position is probably where he's going to ultimately land. High fly act, from what I understand. Not a great rebounder, which is what turned me off from him in regards to my own squad. I passed on him for Cleveland. I know Cleveland's probably looking for this particular type of piece. They need depth at a lot of different positions, especially if they're going to be moving on from one of their two guards. Maybe they can go guard here. And there were some good options with that. But from my understanding, listening to people who talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers, they really want to address their wing situation. And if Tyler Smith can play some small forward and power forward, that will do just that. Definitely somebody who's going to be able to stretch the floor, give them a lot of spacing. And when I think about their front court with Allen and Mobley, I just don't see that shooting ability in place for either one of those players. This is going to create a lot more space for those guards. When one of those guys sits down, he comes in for the other one. If he could play the forward position, you could slip Mobley to the four. Obviously, if Mobley and Allen are out there together, he can play some three, sit Allen down, sit Mobley down, play him at the four. So it's just a lot of different things that you could do with Tyler Smith, and that's why I think they ultimately want that type of player. Another guy that could probably go there as well is my very own guy that I took, Deron Holmes. I hear they want him as well. I just think they really want that piece. But I feel like Tyler Smith is probably more fit for what it is that they actually need, given the fact that they would like a small forward, and he's listed as one, unlike Holmes. So I think that's probably where they will go if he's on the board. I don't think it's safe to say he will be on the board since people are a little higher on him than I am. But I think Tyler Smith falling to Cleveland would be a special fit for their team. And it gives them an opportunity to not move on from their guards if they decide they don't want to. Because if you bring in the wrong guard in this situation, it puts a little more pressure on them to make a decision or not play that guard. And we try to get away from guard log jams, if at all possible, on this channel. So that's why we went with Tyler Smith at 20 with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Next up, we're going with the Pelicans. I have them taking Jared McCain. This is not where I expect Jared McCain actually to fall. To be honest with you, Jared McCain should have went 20 picks ago. Honestly, Jared McCain is a fantastic player. Somebody has to fall from that guard spot, though. And I'm going to be honest with you. One of those guards is going to fall because that's just how this shakes up unless some trades make this draft make more sense. But if everything stays the way it is, even if it doesn't in some cases, somebody that we don't expect to fall is going to fall. Usually in most mocks, it's Isaiah Collier. I did not let that happen necessarily. I went with Jared McCain, a fantastic knockdown shooter, pretty good defensive player. I've heard comps to smaller guards that score the ball, so I'm not really sure if that's him. I think he's a little bit better defensively than that. 6'3", 200 pounds, point guard out of Duke, freshman, 20 years old. I just think this is a fantastic opportunity for the Pelicans to take a high-level lottery talent this far back in the draft. That's really what it is. It's just manna falling from heaven, if I'm being completely honest with you. McCain can go as early as 8, really, but I just didn't like him for any of those situations. And this is the one that I fell on. I just think the Pelicans could use a point guard. They've had issues with their point guard position for a long time. You got C.J. McCollum trying to run point guard. He's kind of a selfish player in that regard. They've run some guys, defensive point guards didn't really work. They just haven't been able to replace Drew Holiday, in my opinion, with a real sound point guard. And so this gives them an opportunity to have that point guard in place. Obviously, there are other things they could do. They got wings on this board that they could take if they lose Brandon Ingram, that kind of thing. You got a center position that maybe you want to address. But some of the centers that I thought that were available here would probably just take away from the spacing, so I felt like that wasn't it. And some of the guys that you ultimately think they're going to take at the center position are already off the board on my mock draft. So that's what I decided to do. You could have went to Kyle Filipowski here. Maybe you could go Bub Carrington, but I just didn't think you'd take Bub Carrington over McCain necessarily this year. So if McCain's on the board, I expect the Pelicans to take him out of Duke. So that's just going to be a nice floor spacer. They already got a lot of shooting on their team with CJ and, of course, Hawkins last year. So I think this just adds to a fantastic shooting core that they already have. Of course, Trigger's there as well, Trigger Murphy. So I just really love what they have, and adding this type of shooter just makes them even better. They're not going to get him in real life, but in my mock, that's just how it went. All right, the Suns are going to be selecting with the 22nd overall pick Carlton Bub Carrington, 6'5", 190-pound point guard from Pitt, 18 years of age. They need a point guard, man. I told y'all, they need to take Kyler Kolick or Bub Carrington, or if for some reason one of those guards fall, Coley or somebody, they need to take them. I understand they may want to put a little pressure on their center position because their center's getting a little old and they have some wing issues as well. But they got O'Neal. They got a couple guys down there that can play the wing. Obviously, you do not want to give them a shooting guard, but I do think that they have a massive void at the point guard position because of how the team is constructed. They just didn't address it at all. They wanted, Bradley Beal, a lifetime shooting guard, and what's his face? Obviously, the other player, Booker, to play point guard, and I didn't want to go forward with that if I had any control over the Phoenix Suns. They need some assets that are going to develop into high-level talent, and at this stage, if Bub Carrington's on the board, he's obviously the player that I think has the highest upside in the range. So if they do have to rebuild, they have a rebuilding piece in place, a guy who was just 6'2", from what I understand, not too long ago, and then went on a massive growth spurt of like 4 inches. So he could still be growing at just 18 years old, a very young guy who is probably not going to be able to help them right away, but with his skill set and his height, is probably going to be able to slip in and play some fantastic backup point guard for Booker and Beal, and you can still have Booker run the point if you really want to go that route, but you actually have a real point guard on the team that can come in and play high-level stuff. If somebody gets hurt, he can come in and be a real serious shot maker for them. Still got a lot of development to do, but this is a team that really needs young assets bad and the point guard bad. So this is just like the last pick, manna from heaven if the Phoenix Suns are able to get Bub Carrington. So that is what I have them doing. The Bucks, I wasn't really sure where I wanted to go here. They're probably not going to play whoever they bring in because Doc Rivers doesn't like playing young players, so that's a little bit of a thing for me. I think they could address their center position. Some people think they need some defense down there with that small forward shooting guard position next to Dame Lillard and Giannis. But when I look at Giannis, I say, okay, the best defensive player I see on this thing is somebody that's not going to be able to really stretch the floor at all, and Giannis provides that problem, so I didn't want to mess up their spacing. So my thinking was, let me just go with Kyle Filipowski, bring Flip in, 7 feet, 230, Duke power forward center combination, sophomore, 20 years old. He can play some center, he can play some power forward, maybe you can slip him to the shooting guard position, small forward, and he just has length, a 7-footer that can come in and help with their overall front court situation. Obviously, Lopez is getting older now, really old, and you probably want to move on from him, so there are a lot of different things, but there are a lot of the centers that you want to fall to the Bucks are already off the board, so Flip was probably the closest thing to a center that you could find without going into second round range guys. I think his upside is pretty solid as a stretch 4/5, 230 pounds, a little more weight than I thought he had. So, this is somebody who's a sophomore, still has some developing to do, kind of gets pushed around by people, but if you got Giannis down there, you got, of course, Lopez and, the other guys that they got on the team. I can't think of the power forwards, but they have some size down there to where they're going to help him with being more tough against some of these other guys, or make it so that he doesn't have to even guard any of those people and play some small forward himself. So that's kind of what it is for me. Obviously, Dame is in place. Maybe they move Dame. I think there's a decent chance that they may try to move him for a more fitting situation, but maybe not. And if not, you could see a hole for them at shooting guard per se. They could definitely use a shooting guard here, but for my money, I just felt like bringing him a big just in case this is a down year for a guy like Lopez, who's really getting up in age. They don't want to necessarily play Giannis at the center position. The defense is going to be even worse. Filipowski should, in theory, with length, help them in multiple positions and kind of give them some flexibility to find their shooting guard in a different way other than through this draft. So there's a lot of ways they could go. And I just felt like Flip had fallen far enough and that their needs in the front court were a little understated, in my opinion, so they could probably go in this direction to be happy. So that's kind of what it is, man. The Knicks have 2 picks coming up, and I told you guys when I first saw that they had 2 picks that I was going to take 2 small forwards, and I stuck to that. I know they need a center. I know that, but all the best centers are off the board already. And I know they could use a point guard, a backup point guard. But I don't trust their coach to actually play anybody off the bench. That's the thing. You could bring in a nice bench guy, and he's just not going to play them. So what I thought made the most sense for me was to bring in people that I think he's going to play. So that's the thinking with the New York Knicks. I went with Jalen Tyson, 6'7", 215 out of Cal, shooting guard, small forward combination, 21-year-old junior. Jalen Tyson comes with a lot of energy, someone who could play fly in the front court. Even though he's a shooting guard, and Lord knows they don't need a shooting guard, I think he could play some small forward as well. So I have him slotted as a 3, and in that situation, I think he'll get some minutes. And I just look at him as a speed merchant, somebody who's going to hit a lot of, be physical in the paint, physical all around the perimeter, play a little defense, but mostly just body people up. 6'7", 215, has some nice length, shot maker, high motor guy. That was my thinking. The Knicks are known for playing hard with high motor players that are going to speed up and down the floor, try to play 48 minutes. So who fits that bill, in my opinion? Who can coach, if somebody gets hurt, trust to play 1,000,000 minutes for 1,000,000 years? That was my thinking. Jalen Tyson's one of those guys. The other guy that came to mind, Terrence Shannon Jr. Not guilty, ladies and gentlemen. We found out what was going on with his case. He's not guilty. A lot of evidence that was released shows that it was a hack job. So his character is pretty much set to go. Now you just got to evaluate him as a talent. I know he has some development to do, even though he's a 23-year-old senior, out of Illinois at 6'7", 220 pounds. But from what I understand, this is a player who specializes in open court speed situations. He is a power runner and a high fly act, somebody who has some defensive tools, some offensive tools. Shooting needs to come around a little more, but what I saw from Terrence Shannon was somebody who played hard. And that was a key for me. If you're going to be a Knick, you got to play hard. If you're going to be a Knick, you got to be able to run the open court. With guys like, obviously, everybody that they have, my mind's going blank, but I think of guys like Julius Randle, think of Josh Hart, think of what they have down there. They need small forwards, if anything at all, and well, centers definitely, but small forwards who are going to be able to play multiple positions, be switchable, defensive-minded, and who are ultimately going to play fast and hard. I don't need no motor issues with the Knicks. I don't need nobody who's going to be lackadaisical. I need people who are going to be speed running and have high energy and ultimately be durable as possible. So that was my thinking. Jalen Tyson and Terrence Shannon are what I wanted to do with the Knicks' 2 picks. I know that's 2 small forwards, but I don't need a guard necessarily. I don't need too much. If I want to play the center position, if Julius is coming back, I got those guys in place. Maybe the center position really does need to be addressed, but like I said, most of the centers that you want on the Knicks in this range are gone, and you got to reach into the second round for that. So I wasn't going to do that. Give me 2 small forwards for my money. All right, the Wizards. So the Wizards, I took Tyler Kolek, 6'3", 110, Marquette, point guard, senior, 23 years old. I didn't know Tyler Kolek was 23 years old until after I made the pick. A senior, I thought he was a freshman. I think they need somebody who's going to set their offense up, a real leading point guard. I preferred for them to take a point guard early in the draft, but it doesn't look like they're going to really do that. And in my mock, I had them taking Ron Holland because I thought maybe there might be a point guard back here, and I was right. I took Tyler Kolek in the back of the draft for them. I think they need that setup point guard to help them. I don't think they need a shooting guard. Like I said, the center position is kind of iffy around this range. They got some guys in the second round. They could take it to center position with their second round pick. So for me, just address the point guard. But for me, I'd rather a younger point guard because I think they're a rebuilding team that probably doesn't need to win now, and a guy like Tyler Cole would probably be best to be in a different situation. And so I think they need him, but he probably doesn't need them. I think he'll get his minutes there, but I think there are other situations that'd probably be a little better for him. But at the end of the day, when I took this, I thought he was a younger guy. So nevertheless, Tyler Kolek, 6'3", 110, Marquette, point guard, one of the best facilitators in this draft, a nice knockdown shooter. Somebody that kind of reminds me of Steve Blake, to be honest with you. Although Steve Blake had a lot more defensive intangibles to his game, I think on the offensive end, that's who I can count on Tyler Kolek kind of be. Just an excellent playmaker, a fantastic shooter, somebody who's going to make a lot of good decisions, probably not turn the ball over too much if my mind serves me correctly. And just a really solid guard I like a lot. And I think he's going to be somebody where you're going to be like, why did he not go higher in the draft? I just think he's going to be ready to play, and he's going to wow some people with his playmaking ability early on. So he's going to have the keys to the car with the Washington Wizards. And in my mock, he's going to be running with Ron Holland, probably somebody more so like Zach or Sar. But nevertheless, in my mock, that's how it is. And I just think that he can set guys up in ways that a lot of people in this draft at the guard spot wish they were able to do, man. He's just a much better playmaker than people are about ready for, in my opinion. So that's where I got the Wizards going, 26. 27, the T-Wolves. Now, this is another guy that you don't expect to fall this far, but in my mock, that's just how it went. Jacoby Walter fell to the T-Wolves, 6'5", 197, Baylor, shooting guard. 19 years old freshman. I don't think Jacoby Walter is actually going to fall this far. I think he probably goes to like the Magic at 19, but I just did not want to give a Magic a guard, and I really didn't see another opportunity for him to go. I think the teams in this range kind of had specific needs. I could have definitely sent him to the New York Knicks, but I did not want to give them a shooting guard. I think Jacoby could play some small forward. He has been mocked as early as 7, in my opinion, to the Blazers. So his range is vast, extremely vast. This is as far as I've seen him fall in anybody's mock, and my very own. But that's what I have him doing. I have him falling to the T-Wolves with the way this draft board just kind of set up for me. And he's going to provide a lot of shooting there. Obviously, they don't really need a shooting guard with Anthony Edwards being in the future, but if he can play some small forward, that'll help a little bit. And I just think that's what they need, is a little more floor spacing. They could use a point guard as well, so they may want to reach down for a second round kind of guy for the point guard position. But I didn't have them doing that here. I did not have them doing that. I just decided that I was going to go Jacoby Walter. I thought he would probably be the best shooting guard on the board. The value is ridiculous. So I didn't think T-Wolves could really let him pass them up at 27. I definitely don't think so. And to a point, he just feels a need. They need the shooting, at the end of the day. I think there's a chance they could lose some wings in the future. Obviously, this is a team that's mortgaged a lot of their future, so they need high upside players. So this is like a perfect opportunity for them to get much higher value for their pick. And when you don't have picks, that's exactly what you need. So I think I kind of helped some teams in that way with this mock, how it's set up. Let some guys fall to some teams that really don't have picks, so that the picks that they get are much better than what they would expect, higher value. And so that's how this kind of shook out. I think Jacoby Walter is going to come in, probably not be ready right away, but somebody you can run plays off of, good timeout, out of timeouts, running corner threes off of screens and stuff like that. Somebody who can really develop into a 3-and-D specialist. Somebody who hasn't done a lot of workouts with a lot of different teams, not a lot of footage out there of him playing ball too, which I think could also contribute to him actually falling in real life a little bit. Maybe not this far, but I don't think he goes in the lottery. And, I think his talent is good enough to get in the lottery. I think he's been, it's been heard that he's compared to people like Ray Allen and Bradley Beal. So his upside is way in the sky, but I just don't think he's that great defensively. KCP is a common player for him. You may even see in this situation him falling to the Nuggets, since they're going to lose KCP, and that's who he develops to. He's kind of compared to maybe the Nuggets trade up to get him or something like that. Because it looks like that could be possible. Maybe Jacoby goes to the Kings because obviously they could be losing Malik Monk, but I didn't have them missing out on Dillingham at all. So this is how it shook out, man. I gave it some thought. I didn't want him to fall this far. I'm not this low on him in any stretch of the imagination. But like I said, man, this is a weird draft, and some people are going to fall, man. And so Jacoby Walter did fall, but a little further than I probably would actually have him in most situations. To the T-Wolves. Helped them with their shooting situation, and they need it. They really could use the spacing of the floor with guys like Gobert and some of the other guys, Anderson. You just can't trust to hit a damn jump shot. So this guy comes in and immediately provides a great deal of spacing and another piece to go forward with McDaniels and, of course, Edwards. Obviously, you know, Karl Towns as well shooting the ball, but at the center position, power forward position. So this gives them a little more backcourt shooting to help with the spacing for Edwards. The Nuggets had a lot of different ways this could go. I have them taking Baylor Shireman, 6'7", senior out of Creighton, 198 pounds, 23 years of age. A shooter, man. Fantastic shooter, fantastic rebounder at his position. Big, nice size. I think he's going to develop even more size as he goes forward. Just a really, really, really reliable shooter. A little streaky, kind of all over the place, which is why I didn't have him go higher in the draft. But I think when it's all said and done, he's going to be a high-level player. And at 23 years old, he should be able to help a team like a Nuggets, a championship contender, come in and be yet another weapon, provide some depth for a really shallow bench, in my opinion. Provide another weapon for Jokic and Murray to find in the corner. If they do lose KCP, you got Baylor Shireman who can come in and step forward and be one of those guys. Of course, they do have some other shooting guards. Christian Brown is in place, but I don't trust Christian Brown's jump shot. So Baylor Shireman can kind of step in and be where Christian Brown would ultimately normally be and then move Brown to the small forward, for which he's big enough to guard people. So you can move Shireman to the small forward as well. So it just gives them some flexibility at their shooting guard position. If they are to move on from KCP, this will give them some shooting that keeps them in position to continue to have weapons that can catch and shoot around Jokic. And that's really what it's all about for me. Utah, a million different ways they could go. A million different ways they can go here. But I felt like Johnny Furphy was probably the guy that they'll likely take at this situation. 6'9", 202 pounds, shooting guard, freshman out of Kansas. Another freshman project for the Utah Jazz to work with. Guy that I hear has a lot of athleticism, open court guy. Somebody who's going to drive at the rim, dunk the ball a lot of the times, rebound the ball, kind of play some defense from what I understand. I expected him to be a shooter, but he's not as much of a shooter as I thought he was. But just a nice player that you can kind of slip in the 2-guard, 3-guard spot, 3 small forward spot, and just have him be wiry all over the court, jumping and rebounding, catching lobs in situations. Just a really nice, athletic, small forward shooting guard guy. You know, somebody who can kind of hit some corner threes as his shot further develops. Maybe a guy with even some real starters upside, man. So the Utah Jazz have a lot of different things they could do. They're a rebuilding team. Plenty of different needs, but power forward definitely isn't one of them. And so I just went with Johnny Furphy at the shooting guard spot to kind of come in, provide a little more depth at the shooting guard position, put a little more pressure on some of those guys that they have at the guard position to either get off the pot or play better or get off the team, however that goes. So I did have them taking Isaiah Collier at the point guard position earlier, and Johnny Furphy I think is excellent value at 29 for them as well. Just further solidifying the shooting guard spot and letting them get rid of some of them guards like Sexton and Dunn and Clarkson. It just gives them opportunity to have a lot of insurance for those guys or trade pieces, you know, that they can use to do whatever they want to do. So Johnny Furphy's a high-level guy that I think they can take their time with. And the Boston Celtics, last but not least, I took Kayshawn George, 6'8", 205 out of Miami. There are actually some guys in the second round that I may like a little more than Kayshawn George. But my thinking was, this is Boston, this is Missoula ball, and you got to be able to shoot the ball in their rotation. You got to be able to have some two-way ability, but you must be able to shoot the three. If you can't shoot the three, you probably don't really have any space on that roster. And I always keep that in my mind about the defending NBA champion Boston Celtics. They shoot the ball, man. And so Kayshawn George is probably one of the most talented shooters in this draft. Definitely somebody who needs to put on more strength. I've heard some real criticism about what people may expect of him in regards to the NBA. I've heard one person say they don't even know if he's really an NBA talent. So, you know, it's a lot to learn more so about Kayshawn George for myself. But from what I saw, he's not somebody I expect to drive at the rim and have a whole lot of power driving at the rim. In fact, he's a little unathletic in that way. So he's going to be kind of spacing the floor more so than really doing much anything else. But you got the guys that are driving at the rim. What you need is three-point corner shooters and guys that are ultimately just going to be able to put up threes from a volume from the back of the bench perspective. And I think Kayshawn George can do that for you. excuse me, as he develops, and then as you could start to go forward, trying to revamp your bench and what your overall team's going to look like, he can step forward 2-3 years from now and be a high-level contributor shooting the ball. So that's really what I wanted to do, is just give them the best shooter I could come up with for that value at 30. But there are other players on the back of this that I think could be a little better than Kayshawn George, and I will mention them now in my honorable mentions. But that concludes the first round of my mock draft. A little unorthodox, to say the least. Definitely some things on here that I do not expect to happen at all, because trades are going to make it so that this makes a little more sense for a lot of these teams. But if these teams stand pat, I think this is kind of how it could potentially go if some people at the top decide to go against the consensus, which is what I ultimately had happening here. So my honorable mentions, and it's a nice long list: Ryan Dunn, Pacome Dadier, Adam Bona, Ulrich Chomsky, Cam Christie, Nikola Jursic, Bobby Clintman, AJ Johnson, Trenton Flowers, Jamal Sheed, Jalen Bridges, Enrique Freeman, Dylan Jones, Trayvon Brazell, Jonathan Mogbo, Osari Ishdaro, Juan Nunez, Harrison Ingram, AJ Mitchell, and of course, Bronny James. And so that completes my mock draft, man. I hope everybody enjoyed what I did here. Like I said, I've done a million mock drafts. A lot of them went a little more traditional. And I just felt like I was sick of seeing people mock some of the same stuff to the same places, especially when I don't think some of these people actually fit in these places. So that was my thinking. Just kind of stay away from log jams if at all possible. Do not give teams guards when they already have them. But the truth of the matter is, I think it's some teams that are going to take guards who have a million guards. Some of these young players are just not going to get opportunities right away because of it. So I tried to steer away from that, and I don't think that's what's actually going to happen. So I wouldn't say this is a realistic mock draft. If anything, this is just me going off what I would do if I were in most of these situations, and what I think is ultimately available to these teams because of early decisions that I made. This is not my big board or anything like that. This is just a mock, and I wanted people to kind of hear a little something out of me that you're probably not going to get anywhere else. So that's why I kind of went with Ron Holland early, as to which I probably think his trade is going to likely make it so that certain guys land in certain places. So that's what it is, man. Just kind of wanted to come out of left field this year. Sick of hearing everybody do the same stuff over and over again, especially when this draft is all over the place, when you really consider how many people like certain players and don't like other guys that maybe others have higher in the consensus. So that's what it is, man. I actually like guys like Trenton Flowers more than some of these dudes I took. Ryan Dunn is one of the best defensive players come into this league in years. I just don't think that without offensive talent, he can really fit in anywhere in these top 30. But to be honest with you, I'd be thrilled if my team, the Lakers, walk away with Ryan Dunn. I would not be unhappy. I just think he's one of the best defenders probably we ever seen, if I'm being completely honest with you. Dan Bona is a guy that teams should really want. Ulrich Chomsky is a player who I think is an early development guy who's going to eventually develop into a fantastic defensive player. Cam Christie, brother of my very own Laker, Max Christie, love to have him on the Lakers as well. Bobby Clintman's a guy I've been hearing about for many years. Finally found his way into the draft. I think he's going to be good. Nikola Jursic, I've heard a lot of great things about. Jalen Bridges, another senior I like a lot. Enrique Freeman, who's somebody that I think is going to be fantastic in the league one day. So this is a deep draft, man. Dylan Jones, an awkward kind of big body dude that doesn't make a whole lot of mistakes. Definitely somebody who's going to not be very athletic, but is going to play a good role in this league early on. So it's just a lot of good stuff on this thing, man. A lot of good stuff on this thing, man. Shoot, what can I say? Jamal Sheed is another player I like a lot. Athletic defensive player. So don't get it twisted. I like some of these dudes in the second round a bit more than some of these people I took before them. But at the end of the day, I wanted to stay somewhat close to the consensus, only because I think it represents what is considered value. And if you reach down, then why didn't you just trade down and get a little more for what it is that your bang and your buck is? So that's really what it is for me. But I'll tell you this, as you can clearly see, I reached down for my Lakers. I was going to take fit for my squad because I know exactly what we need. And I just can't see myself leaving such a glaring hole at the center power forward stretch four position, knowing what my team ultimately needs. So if I had a little more understanding of some of your teams, maybe I would have went in a different direction. But I did the best I could, and I tried to do as much homework as I could, which was a lot, to be honest with you. So that's where we're at, man. I still want to study a little more of these players, but I didn't want to let too much more time go before my mock is ultimately recorded. It's what, 8 days before the draft, so we'll see how closely my mock is with the reality of things. I don't think I'll make another one, but this is what I got, man. I hope everybody's enjoyed it, man. I created a lot of space on my phone, deleted a lot of stuff so I could be able to talk like this freely, and I'm happy that I did, man, because I knew this was gonna be a long one. But that's pretty much what I have to say, man. My name is BDF44. I thank you all for watching my 21-24 mock draft, and I'm out.